that correct? Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the November 2nd, 2021 Columbus, Wisconsin City Council meeting. Tonight we are meeting by Zoom in order to protect citizens and City Hall staff from the spread of COVID-19. I do receive weekly reports from the Columbia County Department of Health, and according to the most recent report, the COVID activity level in Columbia County remains at very high, which is actually higher than it was when we reinstated the emergency order 8 weeks ago. So City Clerk Pat Gable will now take the roll.
Albright.
Here.
Arnold.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Gray.
Present.
Motive.
Present.
Reed.
Here.
Rolke.
Here.
All present.
Okay, if you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight's meeting has been noticed in accordance with state statutes and local ordinances. I am now looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda. And don't forget to...
Alder Motive will make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded that we approve tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed?
Go Clark.
Okay, moving on to correspondence and communications. This is a reminder that while we are meeting by Zoom, if you wish to participate in the communication part of our meeting, we ask that you sign up by noon with City Clerk Pat Gable in order to speak. And I believe that no one has done that today. Is that right, Pat?
That's correct.
Signed up?
We don't have anyone signed up.
Okay. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Under number 3, I just want to make one change to the consent agenda tonight. Number 3 is to approve licenses for the 2021 Stop Shop Sip Wine Walk in November. And the change is that the owner of the Tea Time Wine Bar...
Mayor?
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry. There may have been confusion. I think that is number 8 on the committee of the whole. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, because it's also in the consent agenda. But,
Yeah, one is for tea time, and then the other one is the Stop Shop and Sip Wine Walk.
okay, you're right. I was confused. Never mind. We'll just go right on then to approving the consent agenda. So,
Alder Gray will move to approve the consent agenda.
Alder Motive will second.
so it has been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, and this is good for all of us to remember because I didn't really catch the waves because I wasn't watching carefully enough. So if you do want to speak, be sure to wave, and then I'll see you as well as hear you. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Is anyone opposed?
Clarity are being requested for electric assistance at 508 River Road, 508.
Oh. Okay. Moving on to new business. First of all, I do want to welcome our 2 new alders, Amy Moberg-Rolke, who's representing District 2, and Michael Clark, who is representing District 3. And now we are going to go on to new business. We're going to consider and take action on mayoral appointments to various boards, committees, and commissions. And in your packet, you will see that I'm asking you to approve the following appointments. Michael Myers to the Plan Commission, Tracy Rose to CDA, Paul Piperone as the citizen member of CHLPC, Maite Espuro to the Water and Light Commission, and Sarah Moda to the Plan Commission as the alder replacing Paul Piperone. So I am looking for a motion.
Reed will motion to approve the mayoral appointments to the boards, committees, and commissions as presented in our packet and as read.
Clark will second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we approve these appointments. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Okay. Moving on now to number 2, which is to consider and take action on task order 2021-07, the stormwater utility assistance. And as the stormwater utility develops, Rupert Milkey has presented a task order for professional services for consideration. The attached task order details the services provided, including confirming city parcel measurements, creating a fee structure, reviewing a credit policy, developing public information, including public information meetings. You have all of this in your packet, and we did discuss this at our last meeting. Also, the costs that are incurred in the development of the stormwater utility can be repaid by the utility if it is established. So I am looking for a motion for approval.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Well, I think we move it and second it, and then we have discussion, unless, I mean,
Okay.
is that correct?
Oh, no, we can ask questions ahead of time.
Okay,
For
thank you,
clarification
Trina.
and whatnot.
Yes, you may ask, you may ask a question.
Jason, I am just wondering what it would cost to add a third listening session in?
What I would propose is that, it really just be the time at the meeting. I think as far as if we've had a couple of them, I would imagine we'll have a PowerPoint deck that we can modify under the original contract that we have here. So it's really just the meeting time present. I don't see a lot of prep time there. So I would say it's probably between $300 and $500, depending on just, what exactly we need to update or edit for staff, or, have my staff do to prep for the meeting. And then it's just the meeting time to be present. We've found that these public informational meetings usually run around an hour and a half, plus or minus, depending on people filing in and staying after for questions. And then compiling or updating any of the responses that we get. So it's probably in that, I would just kind of give you a range of $300 to $500 would be my best guess.
In my experience in my career, it has been better served to hold 3 public hearings, just giving more citizens the opportunity to participate. Is that something we would need to decide now if we are going to add an extra meeting, or is it something we could discuss at a later date and time and add it?
I'm flexible from my standpoint. If you want to move forward and kind of get this kicked off with what we propose tonight, we can always add that in later. And I'm more than accommodating to do that. We could also, at that point, just discuss, if there's anything else that pops up that we need to dig into further, if there's citizen feedback that we have to look at or something in addition, we can always include that. So if you want to move this forward tonight, with that additional meeting as a consideration to be discussed later, I'm perfectly fine with that. There's no issue on my end.
Thank you, Jason. Then I would like to make a motion to approve the task order 2021-07.
Gray will second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we approve Task Order 2021-07, the Stormwater Utility Task Order. Is there any further discussion?
Jason, I had just a quick question. I was reading through some of the information that was provided, and then I looked at the FEMA map for the floodplains. Would any of the proposed changes to runoff or anything like that, would any of that change the floodplains or the classifications by FEMA?
Not for the stormwater utility. At this point, we're just looking at impervious or hard surfaces throughout the community, and we're basing a fee structure off of that area. So it really doesn't necessarily tie to the floodplain. I think when we get into talking a little bit about the stormwater analysis on the next agenda item, that what you're asking is correct, that it would impact the floodplain.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion? Okay. Do we need to take a roll call on this?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Clark,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
Motive,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Rolke,
Aye.
Albright.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And now we're moving on to number 3, consider and take action on Task Order 2021-08, Stormwater Study Amendment. And so as the City Council explores the options and impacts of changes to the stormwater system, several items of potentially useful information have been discussed, and Rupert Milkey has presented a task order to update the recently completed stormwater study with additional information if the council would like to obtain additional information. Services included in this task order include surveying and modeling potential stormwater bypass options, modeling the impact of removing the dam, and updating the stormwater study report. Yes, Ian.
I just had a quick question for Jason. So it's come to our attention that it has to be conducted to meet very specific guidelines to the state Wisconsin administration codes, and it has to include like the delineation of a 100-year floodplain and inclusion of materials for proper zoning ordinances. Is that all part of your plan? Have you gone into that yet, or?
That's a great question. I appreciate that, Ian. I did see that additional information. In preparation of this task order, I did talk to the floodplain engineer at the state. So what the task order, what we were proposing was to analyze the water surface level and the impacts to the tailwater conditions and the flooding with and without the dam. And we would be using the state provided hydraulic model, and we would be using that. So it would essentially be their model that we would be using, so it would be in compliance. The 2 codes that are listed in your concern are NR 333, that's related to dam construction. At this point, we wouldn't be building a dam. We would actually be potentially removing the dam. So by default, that's just, I think, one of their default things saying if you're doing something, be aware of this code. NR 116 is related to floodplains. And so what they would want us to do is if we analyzed it, and this is how I'm thinking about this, if we analyze this per the study, and that's what we're doing, is analyzing the floodplain and the water surface of the river and how that would interact with or without the dam. In the event that we concluded and we recommended that there would be a benefit for dam removal, you guys would have to move forward with a plan and specification and permitting and all that required information and funding and grants to get the dam removed. At that time, we would have all the information, but we wouldn't, as part of this study, we wouldn't be filing for this letter of map revision to the floodplain map. We would know what that is, but we wouldn't have filed the application as a result. So my thought would be that to update the floodplain ordinance, which is essentially referencing the updated maps, which would be updated from the hydraulic information that we'd be doing in the study. So there's a little more on the back end to be in compliance with this NR 116. But I don't know that it would make sense for the city to do that unless you ultimately decided to remove the dam, because then there wouldn't be anything to update, or, you know, if the dam stays in, the floodplain map doesn't change. So I think that to be in compliance, that would come as the second step of this process if it was decided to remove the dam, and that moved forward with the plan and specification permitting and the updating of the ordinance and the floodplain mapping would come at that point. So that would make us in compliance with the information the DNR had provided, if that makes sense.
So would it require additional studies or anything of that nature if we decide to remove the dam, or would the study you're conducting provide all the necessary information for us to do that at that point?
We would have all the modeling completed as part of the study on hand. The only thing we would have to do is prepare the documentation and file the letter of map revision for the floodplain maps.
Okay, so it does include like the delineation of the 100-year floodplain and everything of that nature in the study?
Yeah, this would essentially be the first step, and if you decide to move forward with the dam removal, then that piece would be the second step. But you need this to get to that point. So it's not like the work is being thrown out or wasted. We would just use this work for moving that forward.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question well. In that case, I would move to approve task order 2021-08.
Clark seconds.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we approve task order 2021-08, the stormwater study amendment. And I don't believe we need to do roll call on this one because is that correct?
I think we should, because we'll be spending money with the task order.
Okay, all right, then in that case, we'll do a roll call.
Clark,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
Motive,
Aye.
Reed, Reed,
Aye.
Rolke,
Aye.
Albright.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to number 4, which is to consider and take action on Wisconsin Professional Police Association promotions policy. And Chief Weiner could not be here with us tonight. He was here at our last meeting to describe what was going on. And I'll summarize it for you. During a current promotional process of an officer to a sergeant, it was discovered the current collective bargaining agreement does not address a probationary period if promoted within the union. It does address a promotion outside of the union. In this case, it then falls to city personnel policies. However, the city policy conflicts with the statutory process to terminate a police officer. So this amendment that you have in your packet provides clarity for both the union and the city. And both parties have reviewed the amendment and they agree on it. It was written by the city's labor attorney. And if it is approved, it will become a permanent component of the collective bargaining agreement. So unless there are any questions on this, I'm looking for a motion.
Alder Albright can make a motion as how Mayor Arnold read it, as read. I guess Alder Albright will make a motion as read.
To amend the current contract. Oh, yeah.
Alder
Okay.
Motive will second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to amend the current contract between the City of Columbus and the Columbus Professional Police Association as discussed. Is there any further discussion on this item? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda, and I think Scott is with us tonight in case there, I know yeah, there he is. In case there are any questions on this. This is to consider, oops, I'm so sorry, I skipped one. Amy Jo, let me go back to number 5. think I got my stuff in. There we go. All right. So, here we are. This item involves a web-based recreation software, and it's a request from the Recreation Department. It is something that we have discussed in the past. I see Amy Jo is here tonight with us. If you want to just give a quick summary, we did discuss it before. The Rec Department has been experimenting with 3 web-based software programs, and the top choice is MyRec. And the consensus of the committee members was to move forward with MyRec. So that is on our agenda tonight for approval. Is there anything, or Amy Jo, did you want to, Trina?
Oh, not a question. To double and triple check that we have your written notice to our previous vendor on cancellation of services with them. Because I do remember it otherwise automatically would renew. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yep, we did that a year ago, and we have a signed confirmation from ActiveNet's attorney. So we're all
signed
set.
confirmation. Oh, thank you.
Great.
You're welcome.
So all those bases have been covered. Good question.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions about the MyRec program that is being proposed? Okay, in that case, I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to approve?
Holder Motive will second.
So it has been moved and seconded that we approve the Recreation Department signing up with MyRec. And I believe we will do a roll call on this one since it involves
Money.
Gray,
Aye.
Motive,
Aye.
Reed, Trina,
Aye.
Roki,
Aye.
Albright, Shelley,
Aye. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted.
and Clark.
Aye.
Motion carries.
great. Thank you so much. Now we're moving on
Thank
to
you.
number. Oh, you're welcome, Amy Jo. Now we're moving on to number 6, which is to consider and take action on the fire department's revised position descriptions. And I think Scott's here. Yes, he's here. And he did outline this for us at our last meeting. And there's quite a bit of information in your packet about the different positions and what Scott is asking. Maybe, I wonder, Scott, would you be able to give sort of a Reader's Digest version of your request, especially since we have 2 new alders here with us tonight?
Sure. Basically, when I moved here in 2004, the job descriptions were kind of vague. Officers and firefighters didn't really know who they were truly reporting to or what their responsibilities were. So it's something I had worked on for a while, and I had some contacts out there that I got ideas from. So everything now is all the officers from myself on down. We all have our roles and responsibilities, who we answer to, what the responsibilities are, and off of that, they know who they can work with, and basically, it's just bringing more structure to the department. And I showed it to many of the officers, and I've been giving them the job descriptions, and they all like them. I mean, some of the people have been on there longer. They were used to the other job descriptions that had them a little more able to freelance a little more. So this just keeps a little under control. Everybody's answering to somebody else, and I'm at a more pressured environment. So that's what I'm looking for. So I'm
Thank you
looking
very
for
much.
acceptance. Thank you.
Great. Did I
Do you have
hear?
any questions?
Yeah, I thought I heard somebody move. Did I hear that? Okay, anyway.
Alder Gray would move to approve the revised position descriptions for the fire department.
Okay,
Seconds.
so it has been moved and seconded that we accept the revised position descriptions in the fire department. Is there any further discussion or any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, we are down to, thanks for coming, Scott. We are down to number 7 on the agenda to consider and take action on the human resources revised position description. The last time this job description was revised was in 2019. I know Kyle is here, and he can, if he's got anything he wants to add to the description in your packet, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. So the position was changed to from a confidential administrative assistant to a human resources administrator. When it was revised, there were some significant duties that were not carried forward from the job description, from the CAA job description to the HRA job description. So the description that you're seeing tonight is a blend of the current and previous descriptions and has been revised to more accurately describe the job duties of the HRA position. And if we approve this tonight, then they are ready to move forward with their recruitment plan to fill that position. Does anybody have any questions for Kyle before we move on? And if not, I'm looking for a motion.
Alder Albright can make a motion to approve the human resources revised position description.
Clark seconds.
So it has been moved and seconded that we approve the revised human resources position description. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes. And we now have the claims, the monthly claims through October 28th to approve. And I kind of missed Paul tonight because he always found a typo somewhere. So anyway, I am looking for a motion to approve the monthly claims.
Motion to approve claims in the amount of $102,099.70.
Elder Motive will second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the monthly claims in the amount of $102,099.70. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Okay.
Kyle, now that we have a new treasurer getting started, will he be giving any kind of financial presentation in the near future as he gets a little settled in his position?
Yes, he's actually on the Zoom call tonight. I think he will. Typically, the second meeting of each month is when you see the financial treasurer's report. So yeah, I would envision some of that coming forward. They've also been working to clean up any of those last details from the financial statements with the auditors, so that should be wrapping up. So I anticipate the financial information will start to get a little bit more robust and user-friendly.
Thank you.
I think so it has been moved and seconded, and I think we do a roll call on this one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Motive?
Did you say Moda? I'm sorry.
Yep, okay.
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Rolke,
Aye.
Albright,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Gray.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you so much. Moving on to number 9, report of the city officers. I think I will let Kyle go first.
All right, thank you. A few items tonight. The wastewater treatment plant influent pump project is complete, and the contractor has submitted their final paperwork to kind of close it out. So that project will be completed and closed out shortly, so we'll be done with that one. Also at the wastewater treatment plant, or related to the wastewater treatment plant, you may have noticed there's an older building at the Landscape Recycling Center. That's actually a portion of the older wastewater treatment plant setup. It's been abandoned for several decades, and it's fallen into disrepair, and some of the materials are kind of degrading. So just wanted to mention that you may see some work happening there. They'll be doing some work to remove some asbestos and other hazardous materials, and this part of the project is relatively small. But we're still continuing to work on a final solution to abandon that building properly, because it has been there for an extended period of time, and it's not really serving any purpose and could potentially be a safety hazard. So just know you may see work, but hopefully in the next year or so, we'll have more of a final resolution on that issue. Also, we touched on the HR administrator position. We had a pretty solid recruitment there, and interviews will be held next week, and we're optimistic that of the candidates that have kind of risen to the top in the screening process, that we'll find the right fit there. But we're just really excited to have a lot of interest and to get the opportunity to speak with some of the candidates. And then finally, we recently received about a $3,600 grant from the League of Wisconsin Insurance Company. It was dedicated to parks and recreation expenses was what would be eligible. And so the recreation director and public works director and then DPW staff kind of came together and came up with a variety of ideas about how to best allocate those funds. And I think they came up with a nice combination of benches and some signage for the shelters, so that it's easier to identify which shelter is which as people are looking for their birthday party and things like that, as well as some safety signs and some signs about park regulations. So they'll be making those purchases soon. So I think that's a great thing that they came together with some neat ideas that should help the parks, but also kind of a nod to our league insurance that these grants come in, and it's obviously comes from the rates that we pay in, but it's nice to see something back. So just wanted to point that out, and that's all I have.
Great, thank you so much, Kyle. Well, Halloween is come and gone. If you walked around town, some people really got into decorating their houses, and it was so much fun to see. I also attended an event at the cemetery, the Columbus Hillside Cemetery. It was entitled Shadows on the Hillside. I mentioned it, I think, at our last couple meetings. And it was really fascinating. I learned so much about Columbus history and the settlers and the early people who ventured here centuries ago to settle our little town. And I just really want to congratulate the Columbus Historical Society for, this was their first year doing this, and I thought it was just fascinating. One of my particular favorites was a woman whose name was Hattie Griswold. I'd never heard of her before. She moved to Columbus before the Civil War. She left Massachusetts. She was an abolitionist, or she was in favor of abolishing slavery and felt that Massachusetts wasn't doing enough, so she came to Columbus, Wisconsin, and she was a poet and a writer, and she was all for women being able to vote. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen for many more decades, but she got to know some of the notable authors of the time and wrote books about them, so just really fascinating for me, and I really hope this becomes a yearly tradition in Columbus. Veterans Day is coming up. It's Thursday, November 11th, And I want to remind everybody, if you take a drive down Ludington Street, Park Avenue, be sure to check out the banners that are up again this year honoring Columbus veterans, men and women who've served in the military. And I certainly want to express deep appreciation to everybody who has served our country in this way. November is going to be pretty exciting in Columbus. We have Small Business Saturday coming up right after Thanksgiving, and the Stop Shop and Sip and Wine Walk on Saturday, November 27th. So it's a great way to show your support for some of our really charming local businesses, and they will be open for you to shop. I see, Paula Steiner, if you are still with us, I want to make sure I get the information correct, because I know in the past, and I think you could probably weigh in on this, the holiday parade has been the night after Thanksgiving, but I have a feeling this year it's different. It's going to be in December, and I don't want to mislead anybody. Are you here, Paula?
I believe she's dropped off. However, I did see an application today for the street closing permit, or for the street permit, and I believe it was Saturday, December 4th.
Okay, and I see Amy Jo, you were waving. Amy Jo, so the parade is not going to happen that Friday night after Thanksgiving, correct?
Yep, everything is moved to Saturday, December 4th, with a culmination of a bunch of events downtown, working with the chamber, like a bingo event. So, yep.
Okay.
An all-day affair.
Okay, so don't go downtown Friday night looking for a parade.
Correct.
It won't be there unless you make it yourself. Okay, so that's it for me, and thank you, everybody. Oh, right, we have to adjourn. I always forget about that part. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Alder Gray moves to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nobody voted opposed. Okay, we are now adjourned.
All right. Not sure if Michael Clark and Amy Rolke are back yet. Don't see their, or if their cameras are just off. Got everybody else, it looks like. There's Michael. Okay, well, I think we can get started with the basic housekeeping items, and I'm sure Amy will be along shortly. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Columbus Common Council Committee of the Whole. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd. I have 7:13 p.m. And with that, if our clerk, Pat, could take a roll call for us.
Albright,
Here.
Arnold,
Here.
Clark,
Here.
Gray,
Present.
Modiff,
Present?
Reed,
Here.
Rolke,
Here.
all present.
Perfect. And of course, this meeting has been properly noticed. So next up on the agenda is to approve the agenda. So unless there's any discussion, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Looks like Trina's dog wants to make a motion.
Alder Motive will make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
They can do that at the time.
Rolke will second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Next up is citizen comments. Like the mayor said earlier, while we're doing Zoom meetings, we do request citizens to sign up at noon the day of the meeting. I don't believe there were any signed up for comment. Were there, Pat?
No, no one signed up.
Perfect. Thank you. So then moving on, in your packet you will find the meetings from the CHLPC for 9/8/21 and the CWL from 9/23/21. Were there any comments, questions, or concerns on any of that? Perfect. Moving right along then. Item number 6 is to review and discuss the Board of Commission of Public Lands, the BCPL loan program for Tower Drive land purchase. We have Matt Schreiber here with us today to give us some more info.
Yeah, so just to recap briefly for those who are new to council, recently we approved an offer to purchase 7 acres on the corner of Tower Drive and Hamilton Street, kind of over by the water tower, I guess is a good way to describe it. And to move forward with that purchase, we would like to pursue a Board of Commissioner of Public Lands loan. The good thing about the BCPL loan program is it gives you flexible funding, and it gives you a relatively quick turnaround time to actually obtain the financing. So one of the things I put in the packet, basically anything under 5 years is 2.5%, 6 to 10 years is 3%, and then anything between 11 and 20 is 4%. I broke down kind of in a table, just kind of looking at a 5, 10, 15, and 20-year projection of what that would mean for an annual payment and then total interest and then the total cost of the loan. The purchase price is $225,000. And it's built in obviously to the total cost of the loan. The one thing I guess I would keep in mind is this is definitely a long-term asset with purchasing land. So there is some, I think, flexibility to consider maybe a 20-year and having a lower annual payment. And keep in mind, this is an annual payment. The Board of Commissioner of Public Lands, instead of having monthly, it's every March we would be paying this loan. But there's also no penalty for prepayment. So if we wanted to do a 20-year and then pay it off when we do bonding, when it would make sense to kind of roll it into bonding, that would be another option that we could consider. The other thing that I just wanted to point out that I put in the memo is that technically the first payment for this wouldn't be due till March of 2023. So because right now we're in a 6-year window, where it bumps it out to 2023. So I guess with that, I'm looking for a direction on which term you would prefer, and I can contact the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands and move forward with that. There is a resolution that would be approved at the next meeting that I need to request from them when we, from the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands when we submit an application. With that, any questions?
Awesome, thank you so much, Matt. So I mean, of course, the less amount of interest we pay is always the better, but like you were saying, this is going to be, there will be no prepayment penalty, so if we pay it off early, we wouldn't have to pay the full amount of interest. It's not fixed that way, so. I don't know, for me, I suppose, I don't know exactly what, if this will just be coming out of the general fund, if this comes out of any department at all, or where's the money come from each year?
So the payments would be coming out of the debt service fund, but that fund itself is funded primarily by property taxes.
Okay, so it'll come directly out of that. And with that being said, Kyle, what would be your recommendation? You know the budget better than any of us of what an annual payment would be comfortable and what route do you think we should go?
Yeah, Matt and I talked about this sort of at length. Obviously the lower loan cost of the 5-year is really appealing, but I know that adding $47,000 a year next year could be 7 or 8 times the amount of new tax revenue that we expect to get. So, I would do probably something more in the 10, 15, or 20. But also, I think we do have some larger bond issuances that we're planning on making in 2022. And so I would anticipate refunding this loan with more of a bond, which is going to have much more attractive interest rates. So with that being said, I would recommend one of the options other than the 5, just in case we decide not to refund it, or there's any other hiccup that we're not, saddled with a really high debt load that we weren't anticipating.
And the larger bonding that you're discussing, when exactly were we looking at that again?
It'll be in 2022. We have the State Highway 89 project and the CDBG close project also to pay for. I'd like to make it late spring so that we, hopefully don't have a lot of extra payments. I don't know if we'll be able to stretch it far enough to have no payments next year, but it would definitely probably be late spring or very early summer.
Okay, thank you. So if we did do that, then we'd only maybe make a payment on it, so that's reassuring. Does anyone on council have any thoughts of?
I'd be comfortable with a 15. I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels about it, but I think going the full 20, to get the lowest payment, there's not much difference between the 15 and the 20, and I would just rather pay it off earlier.
See, as far as I'm concerned, if we go 15, I think we should go 20 because it's the same interest rate with no prepayment penalties.
That's
so
exactly what I was gonna say.
Going 20 doesn't cost us any extra money. In reality, we could still pay off in 15. So I think if we go over 10, we should go 20 personally.
Right. I agree.
Trina?
I'm the one slightly leaning towards the 10-year. I don't know, for the 20-year, I hate the idea of adding on a possible $100,000 in interest. Although, we'll probably be refinancing, or that's probably not the right word, but we'll probably be redoing this funding, but still, I don't know.
Would this property be likely sold by the city to somebody that wants to develop it, or?
There's a variety of uses that the property might have, but we also think that there might be some other events that, that happen that could end up giving us some of the funding to pay for this. But, until anything becomes certain, I think preserving our options is the best route.
Go ahead, ahead, Sarah.
I would like to support the 10-year at the 3%. I think that we can handle that payment with the debt service, the way the budget looks currently. And I think we'll have it, paid off with the bonding sooner rather than later. So I would like to see us do the 10-year.
I agree with Trina and Sarah.
Okay, so it looks like at least half the council supports the 10-year. What are your thoughts, Shirley?
I was gonna go, since it was 4%, I was saying, why not go with the lower payment and just pay it off early, because we actually just did that with our place, so, yeah, but that's, yeah. The lower payment is always nice if something comes up.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of torn in that respect. So I think if there is any potentiality of us keeping this and not wrapping it into more bonding, I would like to see the 20, because that gives us more flexibility. It doesn't say that we can't make a $50,000 a year payment and forego a lot of that interest, since there is no prepayment penalty. Just because you sign up for a 20-year loan doesn't mean it's a 20-year loan. So I think it gives us the most flexibility. If we are, like 99% sure we'll just end up wrapping it into something else, then I think the 10 would be fine. But in reality, if we're wrapping it that quickly, we're talking saving a couple $1,000, nothing of real significance. Those are my thoughts. So I suppose, anybody else have anything to add, or would you guys like to, so it looks like basically we have two scenarios coming forward. If no one else has anything to add, we can do a show of hands for the 10 and a show of hands for the 20 and kind of move it forward to the next meeting based on the majority, if that makes sense. Does anybody else have any more discussion before? All right, so I'll start with the 10-year. By show of hands, how many people would prefer 10? I'm seeing 2 or 3. And by show of hands, 20. All right, and Mayor Arnold breaks the tie in that one. So we'll move that forward to the next regular meeting with a 20-year debt service. Is that good enough for you guys? Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kyle. Let's see here. Next up, we have review and discuss Columbia County Health and Human Services Aging and Disability Resource Center MOU between the Senior Center and Columbia County Nutrition Site for 2022. Is Kim on?
I don't see her, so I'll just step in. This is one of the formalities that we go through every year. It's just basically an agreement between us and Columbia County that allows them to operate the senior center as a meal site and distribution point. Currently, it's really just a distribution site. They do pay a small amount of rent or consideration each month. It's relatively small and really is kind of serving as a community service for the region, but this is just something that we annually entertain.
Perfect. Did anybody have any questions or comments for Kyle? Is everyone comfortable moving this forward to the next regular meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So then next up we have review and discuss the alcohol license application for Tea Time. And like Mayor Arnold was alluding to before, it sounds like she's not going to be ready in time for the licensing. Or for the inspections for the license. So it sounds like she would prefer us to table this. Is that what I'm gathering that correctly, Kyle?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I would like to just table this until our next committee of the whole, if everyone's...
Yep.
Go ahead, Jan.
Oh, no, I just had a question on it. Looks like it's asking for a, Class B liquor and beer. would she also want the C or no? I know their logo is about a wine.
Right, it would make sense for them to have a wine license.
Just wanted to check into that before it comes back.
The wine would be included, the wine would be included in her application, under the liquor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Trina, for looking out, because of course that would be important to them. So everyone's in favor for tabling this till next time around?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let's see here. Review and discuss the contract with KB Tree for removal of trees for the Highway 89 project, and we do have Jerry here. Yep, there he is. You just moved on my screen. People move around sometimes. If you want to fill us in on that.
Yeah, I'll try to summarize it the best I can. Early on in this process, the state of Wisconsin with the Highway 89 rebuild requested to the city if they could perform the tree removal process out there. There were several trees that were designated and tallied as far as having the need to be removed for that project to move forward. And for various different reasons, they asked the city that they could remove them. The city agreed. I wasn't privy to the conversation, but my understanding at that time was that the city could remove them if they had the time or the means of the equipment, and anything that they could not remove, they could contract out. The understanding is that moving forward with this, anything that it's basically reimbursable at 100%. It's just by reduction of the cost of the overall job cost. It's my understanding that whatever the contract is finalized at, the state will reduce the cost of that contract. The reason there's fluctuation there or the ability to adjust is because we've already been able to, our staff is doing a really good job of being on top of tree moves, and they found time to get out there and remove a couple. So they've reduced the overall trees that need to be removed by a contractor. Now there's several large trees out there that we cannot perform in-house. They're going to have to be contracted out. But we're going to try to do as many as we can, and that will reduce that cost. But overall, what's left is to be done by a contractor. The state DOT did not require multiple bids on this, as basically it's reimbursable. It's just reducing the cost, I should say it that way. So we're just looking for permission. At this point, we're at that process now where utilities have been updated. The road early on next year will be starting to be rebuilt, and we're at that phase where the trees have to start being removed. So we're just looking for permission to move forward with this. Early on in the process, there was an estimate with all the trees put out to our contractor that is under contract, the 2-year contract with the city, and reduce costs to remove trees. They gave us a cost estimate that you should have there in front of you. That's already been reduced by 1 or 2 trees, and we've been said the crew out there, we've already brought that down, but we're just looking for permission now at that point to get to be under contract. We want to make sure this work is started before the end of the year, and it's done probably by March of 2022, as I believe the rebuild starts in May of 2022. So we're just looking for permission to move forward with that process, which started, I believe, we'll be putting that initial estimate back in, I think it was April 9th of 2021, but we're at that process now where we move forward.
Thank you, Jerry. So am I understanding correctly that this is the price for each individual tree? It adds up to that, but there is a chance that that could change because they may or may not do all of these trees, and the state may change pricing.
Well, the pricing will change by as many as trees that we can take down in-house, but we don't have the capability of the equipment to get at some of these trees. I know I was tasked with this early on when I got here, that this was one of the projects, and if we found time to get out there and remove some of these trees, bring down whatever trees that community would have to do, that we would have to outsource. But keep in mind, whatever's left, and whatever their final numbers are on those trees, that cost basically is assumed by the state, that they're just reducing that that overall cost. And Kyle could correct me here if I'm wrong, but I believe this comes off the final cost. You know, we pay it and then it's basically reimbursed. Kyle can maybe elaborate on that a little bit more on that process, as I wasn't privy to that conversation.
Yeah, so just real briefly, when we approved the state municipal financial agreement, we approved an amendment to that in the past 6 months that included that estimate. And so the state essentially treats it as sort of a credit and debit type process. It's a state project, so they're primarily paying all the bills and then allocating the expenses out. So when it comes to sending us a bill, they will certainly send us our cost for the work that's allocated to us, but that they will subtract the amount we've already paid for things like tree removal.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry and Kyle. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Seeing none, everybody's comfortable moving this forward to the regular meeting then? Perfect, thank you so much, Jerry. Then next up, we have to discuss the ATV and UTV use on city streets. This is something that Alder Albright brought forward. So would you like to kind of kick that discussion off?
I can, and I'm glad to see that Jerry's here, because he can, maybe, hopefully, Jerry, you can address the city, what city does with their UTVs, and, well, I suppose they just have UTVs. So, I had a couple people that approached me last spring, before I even was elected alder, would that be something I would be interested in? And I said, you know what, I'm a researcher, so I would have to see, I would have to find out if it was safe and what goes along with it. And then my neighbor, he purchased one and he had a snow plow on it, so then I was talking to him about it. So then I went into the DNR and went into the ATV and the UTV and read the regulations, and I looked at different ordinances. And there's a lot of the smaller communities are approving ATV and UTV. So right now, Fall River has the UTV, ATV ordinance, and then there's trails outside by Old Rock. So what the premise would be is if we open up the streets in Columbus, if you're out by Fall River, you can come through town and you can get out to the trails by Old Rock. The same token, if you are on River Road and you want to go to Fall River, you have a trail that you can map to get out to Fall River, and then Waterloo has approved it. And I'm a little, to be honest with you, I thought somebody was going to sign up to speak from one of the ATV clubs because they're getting to be pretty popular and people are really interested in this. So. But that's fine. I guess I get to be the resident expert because I have done a lot of research and I can try and answer any questions. And I was hoping that if Jerry would talk about the city and the uses and their UTVs. And the other reason why this came up is because I got an email from a resident that saw a city machine, I don't know, in his neighborhood or whatever. So then he inquired about an ordinance with the police department.
Thank you, Alder Albright. Was there anything you wanted to add right away, Jerry, or did anyone have some questions or comments?
My name is Charles Cool. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I can, Charles. Could you? I'm not sure.
I'm just
who you are, or could you introduce yourself, perhaps?
Yes, my name is Charles Cool. I'm sort of on this meeting just as a representative with Quad County Runners, the ATV club that's mainly been enacting and assisting different townships within the 3-county area in enacting routes for this type of use. And I'm also an alderman that brought forth the change back in 2019 that allowed it in the city of Waterloo. So if there's any questions that I could help you with, I'd be happy to help any way I can.
Thank you for chiming in, Charles. Typically, we would require you to come forward by noon prior to the meeting, but I do respect that you have quite a bit of knowledge in this scenario, so we may have a question for you. Thank you for being here. I'm not sure, Trina or Sarah first? Either, go ahead, Sarah, you're not muted, so.
I completely support opening up the roads for ATV and UTV use. However, I do want to make sure that when we put an ordinance in place, that we make it clear that they have to follow the same transportation rules as automobiles, and that they must also have blinkers and horns on them. Not all ATV and UTVs are set up with those, and so they would have to add a kit, which are pretty easy to obtain, but the driver would have to put a kit on there, and I think that's pretty important if they're going to be running on our streets.
Yeah, the safety equipment is definitely important. I agree, personally.
How would this be enforced?
It would be an ordinance and be enforced by the police department, just like driving a regular vehicle would be my understanding.
So we're going to have police officers checking ATVs for blinkers and horns and headlights.
They check cars for it currently too. I mean, if you don't use your blinker and they pull you over, you know, they're going to check and see if it's out or, you know.
Yeah, but the difference there is a car, an automobile is a licensed, registered vehicle.
A UTV and ATV is a registered vehicle as well.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
use on roads?
Yes.
Yes.
And you have to, it's actually checked, there's requirements that they have to follow before they can get a road permit.
So they would have to have a license plate on them
Yes,
for
exactly.
to be able to drive.
The regulation is 10 days from purchase.
And then are they good to go on public roads? Because I know in another community, we went through this, state highways, there are certain regulations on that. Also, I think, you know, in the other communities, there was kind of a robust discussion around what restrictions would be for who could drive, because it's not necessarily the same thing as who can drive a car. It's not the same person who can legally operate a UTV. And I think the state highways for us is going to be a big issue, because if you can't drive on a state highway, that's 89, 73, and Highway 1660 that are not eligible for the route, pushing all ATVs into a more residential neighborhood.
I agree with Kyle. If they can't drive on a state highway, I would be absolutely against having UTVs or ATVs in the city, because then that would be strictly in residential areas. It wouldn't tie anything together, and it would be completely pointless.
So,
Can I tell you?
Oh, go ahead, Paul. Here, let's let Paul talk quick. He knows more than most of us.
Just 2 points real quick. First to Kyle's point, I believe there was a change in the law a few years ago that does allow operation of ATV and UTV on certain state highways, regardless of who has jurisdiction over that particular road. Interstate is off limits, and I believe 151 is probably off limits also, but 89 and 73, as long as the speed limit on that stretch of road is less than 35 miles an hour, then I think that it's allowed. It's allowed if you designate it as such. He hit on the big issue here, because picking the route is always the contentious part of working on this issue. And some municipalities just throw the entire municipality up and say, we're going to designate every street in the city or village as a route. And some try to find a way to get through town from point A to point B, whatever the case might be, to minimize the traffic through the residential areas. That's a decision that you'll have to make. It'll be very, very similar to the famous snowmobile conversations that you've had in the past. But you do need to remember that every street that you designate as a route needs to be signed on both ends of the street, and that is an expense that belongs to the city as well, unless one of the groups is willing to to reimburse the city for the signs. The last thing that I'll say at this point is I do have an ordinance that I've put together for other municipalities that I could put together for Columbus and have it ready for your next meeting if it's something that you want to look at and it takes into effect all the safety issues and everything else that you've been discussing so far.
Awesome, thank you so much, Paul. And I think looking at what you have could be helpful. So my take on everything, as long as they are allowed on state roads, because those would be the primary roads I personally would like to see them on. I would not want to open the entire city up to ATV, UTVs. I think there is absolutely zero reason they should be on residential roads in neighborhoods. And that does not connect them to anything, and it will only serve to disturb people and potentially cause problems. Some of them do get a bit loud. Go ahead, Trina.
For myself, I would be against allowing recreational ATV and UTVs on the city roads. I think it'll just be an ongoing noise issue and safety issue, both for the people driving the little vehicles and for the general people in the large regular cars, SUVs, trucks that are speeding all over. I was so glad when some of my neighbor kids that used to goof off on the street with their ATVs and various types of vehicles, when they moved away, it was wonderful. Although I still have one neighbor with an ATV, an older gentleman that will sometimes be on a bit of my yard. So for me, my experience has just been nothing but headaches.
Right, and I can see where it would get really challenging in a residential neighborhood, and partially because they're not as well lit. You know, like if we look at like James Street, for example, I think we could probably have ATVs and UTVs driving down James Street safely. I don't think we could have them driving down like some of our side streets safely. I just don't think that's a good, plus they can get rather loud and obnoxious for residents. Michael, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that, there are residents that live on the state highways too. And, they have the same objections to noise and, the bothersome things that you would want in your neighborhood, right? So, I mean, it's nice that we're trying to delineate, about like state highway versus non-state highway, but we do have residents that live there too, right? I'm one of them. And I don't, when the snowmobile path was through town, I can tell you, it did not make me very happy hearing a two-stroke engine going past my front window when I'm trying to watch the news, right? There's a little bit of peace and tranquility here that we're going to be disrupting, no matter where you put it, state highway or not.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
I've got a couple points. One, I don't think an ATV, UTV is any louder than any motorcycle or any teenager who's out there driving with their radio on full loud. Those are disturbances as well. But I think we're also completely not talking about the economic development piece of this. If we open up our main roads, like we were talking, James, Ludington, in that area, a lot of these groups are very active and they will come in groups of, 5 or 10, whatever they're traveling in, and stop for lunch and look at our shops. And as we want to promote the downtown, I think this is a good opportunity to reach out to another staff of individuals.
I agree.
I appreciate the hopefulness on that. I don't know how many UTV riders are shopping for antiques, but Mayor Arnold had her hand up for a while, so.
Yeah, I guess I was just gonna ask, what's the upside of, allowing ATVs on our city streets? I heard what Alder Motive said about bringing in some, people who might stop and shop, but I do wonder how many of them are going to, stop for lunch, especially if they're like younger kids. They might want to stop at some of our fine beverage facilities, but and the downside, I guess I'd like to know the upside and the downside, and if it means like we're gonna have to invest money in things like signage, and then thinking about, I live on a fairly busy street that's pretty noisy, as it is, with people going back and forth, and if I would be really concerned about people on ATVs on my busy street. So that's kind of my take, but I'm certainly willing to be convinced.
Trina's the next one that's been trying for a while.
Thank you for a little while. I would be fine with adding something to our zoning to be okay with ATVs and UTVs for working and maintenance purposes. Just to give a little nod of acceptance if someone, does want to put a little plow in theirs and get some sidewalks for themselves and their neighbors. But I really just think there's so much value in peacefulness and safety over the slim chance of maybe a couple folks stopping for lunch somewhere, possibly.
Thank you, Trina. Go ahead, Amy.
And I guess I can understand that. I like peace and quiet myself. On the other hand, I live in a location right now where it's very, very common for large gatherings of motorcycles on a nice day to come and gas up, and that's very, very noisy. And at my last house in town, it was very easy to hear the train going by. I was fairly close to the train tracks at that time. There's only so much noise abatement that you can regulate. And I think people do get used to things. After a while, I stopped hearing the train go through. I don't pay attention anymore to the Harley engines in the summer when my windows are open. I think it's worth exploring this idea at least.
Would you explore it if it was proposed at Charles Street?
I'm sorry, I'm assuming that was me since you did mention Charles Street.
No, I was not picking on an elder. I was just basically saying that, the residents on Charles Street have expectations that they don't want disrupted, and so do we.
Everybody does.
But the people on this street seem to always have these proposals from people that really won't be affected by it. And if they are, I would be hard pressed to hear any alder saying that they would want it going up any of those residential streets up on the hill.
I live up the hill.
Yeah, and I going past my house is going up the hill, so.
It wouldn't bother me.
And we have UTVs going past my house pretty much every day from DPW. And on Halloween, I had a track of golf carts that went down Water Street. So people are driving little vehicles already on our streets. So
I would just also like to.
Thank you, guys. Real quick, we don't want too much back and forth arguing going on. Jerry has had his hand up to add some information for a while. Go ahead, Jerry.
I just want to reiterate that Paul kind of hit on a couple things that I wanted to say. He's obviously dealt with this before. I'm going to say neutral in my opinion regarding UTVs. I will say that I go up to my dad's place up by Warren's, and they have UTV trails all over the place. I now own a place over in Fall River where it's allowed. I've also lived in some bigger cities where it's not allowed, so there's a lot of variance there. The one thing I want to point out is what Kyle and Paul had mentioned is once we adopt certain goals and assume those trails and we designate those ATV trails, we assume once you do that, if right away, the city becomes responsible for the signage, the maintenance, the upkeep of those signs, so that's an expense that I'm concerned about. Where would it be budgeted from? Who's responsible for it? How do you do the enforcement? I'm going to try to stay neutral on my opinion. Obviously, I know I need the equipment in my department, the things that we do. I know fire and rescue have theirs, there's, patrol issues, there's maintenance. I can say I've got needs for it, I can talk about the communities on this neutral, but once we designate certain roads for trails, if that happens, the city becomes responsible right away, you've got to sign it, you've got to regulate it, you have to upkeep those signs. So that falls on us, the expense falls on us, and primarily probably my department as far as upkeeping those signs. And I think that's what Kyle forwarded me on that there's other things that go with that. I'm trying to stay neutral in my opinion, because I need to be an ATV, but you've got to sign it, you've got to upkeep it. There's a lot of expense involved there, I would assume. And I see the club's point of view too. They want to commute back and forth, and I see bringing in the business, but it's right away to right away is how that reads. And you have to sign it accordingly. You need different stop signs at different heights. You need different speed limits. You need different regulation signs. And I think Kyle has dealt with that in the past too, but there's a lot more involved in that.
Thank you, Jerry. And that's I think about as far as we're going to get on discussion for tonight. For me to personally support anything to move forward, I need something more robust than a discussion on it. I would personally like to see more implications of safety, perhaps implications of potential benefits to the city, as well as what the cost would be, what the proposed routes would be, and what everything would look like. I am 1,000% against opening it up in general to the city. It would have to be routes as far as I'm concerned, and we would have to figure out what those routes would be, how we're keeping everyone safe, and I just don't see any other option. I think we do have about a 3-3 split, well, probably a 4-3 split on this, including the mayor. So I think until we have more information or a better plan, there's really no sense in us arguing with each other. So I think for now, I would recommend tabling this until perhaps, Charles, you could go back to your club and maybe work with Alder Albright to come up with a more robust plan for what we'd be looking at, potentially looking at for ATV trails, and perhaps then we could try and figure out what potential costs of getting this done. Maybe you can talk to your club about potentially kicking in some of the costs for signs. I think until we have that info, there's not enough to discuss.
Certainly, this gives us, if you have a number of questions that you want to present, the club would be responsive to those. I know in a number of different circumstances, the club has paid for the signage and for perimeter signing for townships and villages in the cities. So there's options there, for sure.
I appreciate that, and I think if we could get some more of that for a future discussion, and then just tabling it for now until we have a bit more of that, so we can have a good discussion on this and not just argue with each other, so we know more of what we're talking about, because right now we don't have a plan, and I think we need a plan to discuss instead of a theory to argue, if that makes sense.
It does.
Sounds good.
Could I ask Charles to provide me some contact information?
Yes, our club's name is Quad County Runners, and we actually, the website, the URL is the same. And my name is Charles Cool. I'm an alderman with the city of Waterloo. On the city's website, you can find my contact information as well. Okay?
Awesome, thank you, that's very helpful. Thank you, Charles. Unless there's any other last minute thoughts on that, I think we'll table that for now. Is everybody in agreement to table until we have more info? Yep. Perfect, thank you. Then next up is to review and discuss the question for stormwater utility referendum. Could you hit us off on that, Kyle?
Sure. So this is something that we've been talking about for a while, obviously, in kind of multiple phases and in different elements. This is, one of, I guess, the more simple and straightforward portions, but one of the most important. And without a referendum, again, this doesn't really make sense. So we do need to decide, one, if we want to propose a referendum question, which if we want to avoid the levy penalty, we will need a referendum to be approved. And then also, I guess, what the wording specifically will be. We have a very, kind of straightforward question, and we can tweak this anyway, but essentially, so that the voters could understand the question and what it means for them. What we started with is the question, shall the City of Columbus stormwater utility be permitted to charge customers of the stormwater utility for maintenance and operation of stormwater management facilities and infrastructure without reducing the levy limit for fees collected by the stormwater utility? That sort of, from our perspective as a starting point, captures what we're asking permission to do and what it would mean for the residents, and that we would be asking for permission to go and collect those fees without reducing our levy by an equivalent amount. So the preliminary plan had been to pose some question in the spring election in 2022. So this is kind of where staff are looking for a little direction on the question itself as well as the timing of the question.
Thank you. I would like to see the question come up for the spring, in the April election. So I'd like to see the referendum happen immediately. As far as the wording of the question, I would leave that up to people like yourself, Paul, Jason could probably help, and look at what other cities have done, because we're not the first to pose something like this, so I'm sure we could find what they've written for the question. You go ahead, Trina.
I have not come up with the perfect question. I'm just wondering how to make it even more simple and straightforward to get the idea that we're trying to convey water out of the city.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's still a little, just slightly jumbled, and some people are going to be a little confused.
Yeah, it's very, very legal and not very, I don't think the majority of people would know what that question was even really pertaining to. So I think it needs to be a bit more simple, but it also has to be legal because we have to make sure that we cross our I's and dot our T's. So I think that's something that, like, Paul and Kyle and Jason, I trust you guys to come up with the best question possible that's still legal, but hopefully some of us can understand.
I was almost offended there. but not quite. The draft that you are looking at that Kyle read is expanded on kind of a model from the city of Middleton. We did a search for referendum questions that we could find, and we're surprised that there was only 2 in the last several years. One that passed and one that failed. And what Kyle is working off of is the one that passed. So that's kind of the starting point that we had, and I will admit it is a little bit clunky, and unfortunately with referendum questions you're going to find that they need to be a little bit clunky, and that's often a problem with trying to get the legal requirements in there and making it sound like the normal person can understand it. So that is a challenge. I will agree. The one question that I had for Kyle that I will also put out there for you is that there, and I don't know if it's a selling point or if it's a detraction. So that's why I'm gonna raise it now so you can think about it. The municipality that did a question that failed put a specific cap on what this was going to cost. They basically said to have an ERU of no more than, and their ERU I think was 14 if I remember right, which is almost 3 times more of what we're talking about our ERU being. And I don't know if there's a benefit in putting that in there so that you can tell everybody, look, this is $5 a month. I don't know if that helps or hurts. So that's the one thing that's not in here right now that you may want to consider putting in there if that's a selling point.
Thank you, Paul. And I mean, maybe if we know that it's definitely going to be a small number, it would be I don't know if we know that well enough, so go ahead, Gina.
Well, thank you. I wouldn't want to put an acronym in our question. I think people will be even more lost, even if it's a low number. I'm guessing we'll just need to pump out some advertisements, letting people know it'll probably just be $5.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really the route to go with it instead of the question. Go ahead, Shelley.
So my only comment was on it, besides that it was clunky, is I'm wondering, would making it a positive make it more clear? You know, if you vote yes or something to that equivalent, making it a positive?
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if there's a good way to do that. Like, is there a way that you would reword that to make it what you're saying?
I did, and I had it written down. Let me see if I can find it quick. Cause I'm certainly not a wordsmith, but yeah, I thought it was a little clunky.
Okay, perfect. Well, Shelley looks for that. Go ahead, Sarah.
So I want to touch on something that Trina had mentioned, in that we need to do a bit of advertising on this. I kind of brainstormed with Kyle a little bit and told him my opinion, but following some other municipalities in what they've done in order to get their stormwater and utility passed, there's some good models out there for promoting it, but it's going to take typically 6 months, and we don't have a full 6 months. And so basically what I'm trying to say is, if we want to get this passed and let our constituents know why we want a stormwater utility formed, we need to get our butts in gear and start getting that word out there, and start making sure. I know that, Jason, we just approved the task order tonight, but as soon as you have the ERUs and the cost and those sorts of things, making sure that that information is out there.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think that is vital. Perhaps we should start like a subcommittee for us to start tackling some of these things. We can start getting signage and things. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I agree 100% with everybody tonight. The one thing that I envisioned was this question would be on every public informational meeting as part of the first slides. We break it down and go through it. This would obviously be recorded. People could watch it. So we would explain, what the question is, how it reads. Again, just to eliminate some of that confusion. That's not necessarily going to cover everybody, but I think it's part of that. And the other comment that I had, and one of the successful, approaches that some of these other communities that have gotten this passed use is their engagement of other groups. So, having me as your consultant, or Kyle, or somebody stand up there and say, we think this is a good idea, is never a recipe for success in these referendums. It's getting the other public involved. It's getting some of the organizations involved. It's getting a bigger group of people than just the city, quote unquote, involved. And so I would certainly look for organizations within the city that are willing to support this, whether that's businesses and or clubs or anybody that might be interested in seeing this could be a benefit for the community, this could be a benefit for business, this could be a benefit for residents. And I think that is also part of this equation that I would recommend that we take a little closer look at to hopefully better those odds. So I think the education piece is great, but I think the message has to come from kind of a groundswell or a kind of diverse group as well to help get and spread that word. So I think there is some thought. I think there's some great people in this community that certainly would support this. And it's just a matter of finding those people and engaging them and getting them out there as a voice too. So that would be my recommendation from what we've seen in the past.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, and I think that's important. And we are, like Sarah mentioned, we are really short on time. So the more groups that we can get involved, so I think that's something that we should all start thinking about too, is communicating this with any groups that we're a part of outside of the city government, that we could get involved and start helping get the word out to our constituents in a positive manner of what a stormwater utility could do for everyone. Perhaps starting a subcommittee of the council that could get together and, I mean, I don't know exactly what we would be allowed to do and not do, but like I'd be willing to donate to get buy signs for people to put in their yards and things of that nature. Like, so whatever we need to do, we do need to do it quickly. But tonight the big thing is the question, of course, the actual question. Go ahead, Shelley.
So it's 2 lines. By voting yes on this question, the newly created City of Columbus Stormwater Utility will be able to charge customers of the City of Columbus a stormwater utility fee for maintenance, blah, 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 blah. So it's the first 2 lines is how I changed it. So let me read that one more time. By voting yes on this question, the newly created City of Columbus Stormwater Utility will be able to charge customers of the City of Columbus a stormwater utility fee for maintenance, operation of stormwater and infrastructure, blah, blah, blah.
Without reducing the levy limit or fees.
Yep. I just wanted to clean up those first 2 lines because that's what I kept getting stuck on. Or I guess I actually added to it, but yeah.
I like it, but is that leading in any kind of a legal way?
Oh, by making it, saying by voting yes, that could be viewed as leading perhaps. What do you think, Paul?
It's quite possible. The one requirement, and I'm listening and reading at the same time here, so I'll probably do neither very well. But the one thing that you can't do, and I'm also watching Trina's dog, so it's. But
you have multiple eyes.
The one thing that you can't do is form the question as a negative. So it's probably it's going to be really hard to not form it as a negative and not form it as a positive. I mean, so trying to be neutral, but your referendum question wants to push people one way. So I will look at that closer when we get down to the final words, but that's the best I can give you right now.
Okay, thank you. Quick question for you, Kyle. What do we need to accomplish tonight?
So tonight, I think we really need to kind of settle on either the wording or the wording concept, because I'd really like to bring back to the next meeting the resolution that would set the wheels in motion for an April referendum. And it might be if Paul gets a certain number of kind of core concepts, and many of them have already been talked about, maybe Paul will have enough direction already. The perfect question probably doesn't exist or wouldn't be legal to ask. So we probably have to kind of craft it carefully.
Right. I agree, and I really think we need this on the next meeting agenda, because I think we need the resolution before we can really adequately get the word out. So I personally would be fine with it being this question, if it has to be this question. I trust that you guys are going to, the final question will be the best question that we can ask. I know there are just so many restrictions on this, so there's never going to be the perfect question.
Well, then tonight you can resolve one issue. Do you want to put a dollar amount in or not?
I personally do not.
Okay.
I see Trina shaking her head no, Shelley's no. Okay, so no dollar amount.
And I was on the same page, because I think
Right.
to set the dollar amount high enough where you wouldn't have to go through a referendum every time, you're going to be actually providing wrong information, because that's not the dollar amount you would really be charging. So it's kind of it's not that we don't want the fee out there, it's just a matter of, to account for growth, you'd have to make it higher than we plan.
Right, and then we just have to do another referendum later if we don't. Like if we make the dollar amount of $3 or whatever it might be, we'd have to have another referendum in 10 years potentially if it had to raise. Go ahead, Trina.
So I'm looking at the question again. I guess the part that makes it clunky to me is I would like the opening statements to be more along the lines of, shall the city of Columbus create a stormwater utility that may be permitted to charge customers for maintenance and operation of stormwater management, blah, 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 blah. So I just like the idea of clarifying the very beginning of the sentence that we're trying to create a new stormwater utility, doesn't exist, and then are you okay with funding it?
I like that direction, actually.
Yeah.
What your thoughts, Paul?
That raises the question though, because when you phrase it the way that Trina just said, you're asking permission to create the utility in the first place. And if that's part of the question, that's perfectly fine, but that raises the next question is, will you be creating the utility even if the referendum doesn't pass? Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to ask the question to create the utility, because now you've got basically two questions in there. Are we creating the utility, and are we allowed to charge the fee? So you want to just I would prefer to say the first part because it sounds a lot smoother, but it also creates two questions and gives two reasons to say no.
Right, and then if they say no, then we have a referendum that was voted down to not have a stormwater utility at all.
Right. You don't know why it was voted down. There's multiple reasons.
Yeah, I see that. I do like the thought behind it. Like, it sounds more of our intention, but I do understand it's probably not the best way. Shoot. Thank you, Trina. I do really like the way it sounded.
To reduce the redundancy in the second line where it says stormwater utility, if we removed that one, it would sound less repetitious potentially. I added it so it was extra clear, but potentially that would make it flow smoother by removing the redundancy.
Yeah, I think that makes it, reading it without that in my head, that does sound better to me. I think fewer words will help with it being a little less clunky, because I don't think we're ever going to get the wording to be not clunky like we want, but fewer words would help.
Right.
And even the last several words by the stormwater utility could be removed. So just to kind of recap, shall the City of Columbus stormwater utility be permitted to charge customers for maintenance and operation of stormwater management facilities and infrastructure without reducing the levy limit for fees collected?
Yeah, that sounds way better.
That's much better, much better.
That is much better.
I like that. I say we go forward with that. I don't think we're getting better and staying legal. Everybody else happy with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll move that forward to our next meeting and get going with that. But like Sarah was mentioned earlier and Jason mentioned, we really need to start getting the word out. Of course, once we have the referendum, it'll be easier to approach people and start getting the word out, because we need to be able to intelligently talk to people instead of say, like, hey, this is an idea. But if everyone wants to start thinking about groups and different organizations they're a part of that could help spread the word and things of that nature, and perhaps forming a subcommittee of the council to work on it as well. Go ahead, Sarah.
I had gotten a template, if you will, when I went to the League of Municipalities conference on how to promote this, as well as talk to several other alders and city administrators on this subject. I would like to be able to put together an outline, a timeline, a project timeline, if you will, of how we could do outreach to the community and help them understand why we want to do this in time for the referendum. And, you know, I welcome assistance as well, but I would love to be able to bring it to the next COW and see what people think.
I think that's a great idea, and perhaps Jason could be of assistance to help tie in with what Rupert Milkey will be doing, because of course a lot of that are things Rupert Milkey is going to be doing, but the additional outreach is really important. So I think maybe if you wanted to do that, kind of work with Jason a little bit to kind of tie it together so that everything's cohesive would be best.
Absolutely.
Is everyone else okay with Sarah doing that? Because that will, of course, cost the city a little bit of money to have her take up some of Jason's time. But I don't think it'll cost a ton, and I think it's worth it. Is everybody else in agreement?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that, Sarah, if you need somebody to help you, I'm more than willing to step up and help you and talk to people or whatever. And I've already started doing research on it myself.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, so, you know, so I know a good deal about it because I needed to educate myself, so.
Wonderful, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And I think if in preliminary things, I think just the two of you doing things should be okay without us violating open meeting laws and things of that nature. So I think it's probably best to keep it at the two of you and not add more of us. Otherwise, it's going to get a lot more complicated and it'll just slow the process down.
Okay.
If that makes sense. If you guys do have questions or want more input, just make sure you don't like mass ask the other alders. You know, like one-on-one is okay. Perfect. Any other thoughts or any more that you need from us, Kyle?
No, I think we have what we need to come back in 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, Sarah and Shelley, for stepping up. And because I'm sure you understand that's going to be a lot of work. It's probably going to be more work than what you're initially thinking it's going to be. That's a monumental task that you guys are. I mean, that is so far and above and beyond what you signed up for as an alder. So I really appreciate that. This is such an important cause. Thank you so much.
People need to be educated so they understand, because then they're more likely to say yes.
Yes, I agree. And I think you two are excellent representatives of the city to help get that done. So with that, moving on, Kyle is here to help discuss the 2022 budget updates.
All right, really one of the last times we're going to be talking about the 2022 budget as far as in the development phase. We had our workshop last week, I guess it was, and the budget notice has been sent out there. I do have one change that I'll be looking for and asking for in 2 weeks when we look to approve the budget. And that is we had less revenue coming into the CDA by $5,000, and so the most direct way to offset that was just to reduce an expenditure in the CDA budget by $5,000, so it would essentially be a wash. But this is really one of the final opportunities to have a discussion about any changes you might want to see in the final version.
I have changes. I'm not sure if everyone saw their email. I asked Kyle to send out a summary so it was easier for you to kind of follow along with what I'm proposing. And as the new holders are gathering, I'm the one who asks all the questions, and I had approximately 424 questions for Kyle when we sat down on our one-on-one. And I went through line by line the whole budget with Kyle. So first, let me say thank you. I appreciate your taking that time, Kyle. It was really helpful for me. In my conversation with Kyle, I had asked him in particular regarding the contingency account, if he thought that was going to be enough money. And his budget request on the contingency account, which you'll find on page 3 of your printed packet if you're looking for it. But Kyle's ask was for $47,058. Overall, in a city budget, that's not a large contingency. So we went through line items and tried to find ways to offset the increase. I had asked Kyle how much of a contingency he would like to see, and he said 75,000. I went over these numbers, Kyle went over the numbers. I cannot figure out how to make enough adjustment to get him to the 75,000. I wish I could. But I am proposing that we increase the contingency account to $58,758. And bear with me as I go through my explanation as to why it's such an odd number. Next on the list, we looked at our legal notices. That is also on page 3. Went through historic numbers, and we have not historically used the $6,500 that was in the budget. I feel like we could safely cut that down to $4,500, which is a $2,000 reduction. Then also for the following 3 accounts, it would be training and continuing education, mileage, and dues under the clerk budget. I believe after reviewing historically what has been charged in that account, that we could find a reduction in expenses there. And then the next account that I am proposing we make a change in is unemployment expense, and that's on page 5 of your printed packet. There was no request in the budget there, and for the last couple of years we have actually had that expense, and I would truthfully prefer to see an amount in there. I had Kyle take a 5-year average in order to come up with an amount that we could put in there, and it's $5,500. Then I am also looking at, on page 6 of your printed budget, the training and seminar fees under the fire department. That has not been significantly used in the past, nor was there a proposal from the fire department as to how they were going to use up all those funds. So I'm proposing that we drop that to $5,000. Then also under fire, mileage, meals, and lodging, same instance there. It has not historically been used up at the amount that was proposed, nor was there a clear plan outlined as to why they needed that much money in the budget. And next on line 7, under vehicle repairs, it's been historically just in the budget at $40,000. We needed a bit of an offset in order to accomplish this increase for Kyle into the contingency line. So because we have not fully utilized that $40,000, I feel we could drop that to $35,000. And then lastly, on page 8, the admin training. Again, it was a fairly significant amount of money that has not been fully utilized historically, nor is there a clear outline plan of how it's going to be used. So I am proposing we drop that to $8,300. If everybody looks at this and thinks it's reasonable, it is a net wash of zero.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. That is a lot of information and work that you went into to come to that. And that's awesome for going above and beyond and trying to find ways to increase our contingency plan. Because, our contingency funds, that is important to have, of course. So just a couple quick questions for you, Kyle. So some of these things that Sarah's proposing to reduce and put in and then reallocate those funds into contingency, like they look to me like they could, if needed, perhaps even come out of the contingency money, like garage vehicle repairs. If necessary, if we had to spend more money, is that something that the contingency funds would be used for anyway?
They could be used for that, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is the council's budget at this point. So any changes, it's really within the council's realm. I presented a budget, and that's kind of like the starting point for the work that's going on here. And so having the higher contingency is a good thing. It's never a bad thing to have contingency money because it gives you flexibility. It's not necessarily just available at all times for anything. So if a truck did have a significant repair, it would be available if there was funds there and the council wanted to allocate those funds to it. So you'd have that flexibility. But it wouldn't just be an automatic that the $5,000 that would be taken out of that account would be available, if that makes sense.
Right. I'm just saying, in theory, some of these things could be paid for from the contingency fund if we needed the money to go to them.
Yes.
Are there any of the items that Sarah's proposing to take out that could definitely not be used for contingency funds, like training and education? Are those things that we could definitely not utilize contingency monies for?
So contingency money has no special statutory anything to it. It's a pot of money that we use for contingency. Other people call it different things. It's 100% money that can be spent any way you choose, as long as it fits within the broader government spending guidelines. So anything on here that normally would be funded by these individual lines could also be funded by the contingency if needed.
Okay, so that's good to know. Then they're just kind of a little bit more open for where they could go. But so on page 7, the garage and vehicle repairs, you're wanting to put more money into that? Is that what I'm seeing?
No, reduce it by 5,000.
Reduce it by 5,000. Okay, so it's going from 40 to 35. I'm reading it backwards. Okay, yeah.
So the delta column on the summary that I sent each of you shows the difference for each expense and whether it's an increase or deduction.
Okay. Perfect. Anyone have any comments, or Shelley?
I think what Sarah is proposing is excellent. I got an Excel copy of it too, and I went through and did some little calculations on it. And I think everything that she's proposing on here makes sense. Thank you, Sarah. I'm just, you did more work than I did, so thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Yep.
Trina, any thoughts?
Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to decide if it makes sense to move the funds to contingency or to leave them where they would most likely be needed. For fire, I'm guessing it'll be a little different because we have a new chief who may want to, implement a more rigorous training program. So I'm just, really not sure which ones I'd want to, do some trimming from.
That's fair. Honestly, that was one of my thoughts too, was the fire department. That was the only one that really jumped out at me as a potential concern. Anybody else? Mayor Arnold, did you have any?
Yeah, I actually was wondering about the fire department too, especially as somebody noted we have a new fire chief and wasn't sure where, how he was going to feel about the changes. But I do really appreciate all the work you put into this, Sarah. This is really interesting, and that's my only concern would be the fire department. Otherwise, I think everything else seems to make sense.
Let's see, any Michael or Amy? Do you guys have any input?
No.
Okay, so I mean, looking at all this, it does seem logical. Are there any, so some of these do, I mean, a lot of this affects training and things of that nature, Kyle, and that I feel is largely your realm to help yourself and your staff. Do you feel comfortable with the reductions in those areas?
I mean, if I had my preference, we'd be able to keep all of it in there and have everything. Training is something that we try to prioritize, and it's one of those areas when we actually looked at the numbers over years, many of those training lines, we had plenty of cushion in them, and we never seemed to get towards the limit that we were setting. That being said, having some lines that have a little cushion in them isn't the worst thing in the world, because as other lines go over, if you don't have a line for cushion, then you start to have to not be able to do the things that you should be doing, or come back to council and ask for a budget amendment or something like that. So I'd like to keep it all in, but I don't think anything that she's asking or proposing is, completely out of line. It's kind of well within the council's right.
Okay, so part of what you're saying is, so say we take the $1,000 deduction away from the training and education costs for the clerk. If that money isn't used, but some other expense for the same department comes up, it could be reallocated so that it could be utilized for another need, correct?
Yeah, that's what we utilize the expense line policy for, especially in not as much in the clerk's office. There's not as many unknowns there, but DPW does that on a regular basis as a piece of equipment breaks down, so you take some savings by not sending someone to a class. So that is a consideration that should be thought of.
Right, and especially with fire department and things that might be a little bit more utilized than the clerk's office, for example. Mm-hmm. Trina?
Oh, thank you. Yes, goodness, one of those things where as much as training sounds a bit superfluous, the city has lost so many long-time employees in the past couple of years. I mean, we lost, John over at the plant down the street that had been there for 40 literal years. So one of those things where we might need more training than we have historically, just because we have so many, younger people with a bit less experience.
Thank you, Trina. Sarah, go ahead.
I'd just like to say, please don't mistake, it is not that I don't support training, because continuing education and training is very, very important, particularly when we do have the personnel turnover that we have had. The reason I was suggesting these lines is that when Kyle and I went through the historic numbers, historically they have not utilized these amounts, not just last year. It's been for a period of time, and the amount that they ask for has just been continually the same over the last couple of years. So if they're not using it and they have other areas that they could potentially, shift expense lines from in their budget, these were the ones that made the most sense. But I do want to make it clear, I completely support training and continuing education.
Thank you, Sarah. So, I mean, I am definitely on both, I'm right on the fence on this. Because I do, of course, like to see as much money in the contingency account as possible. The other thing is, I mean, honestly, probably the clerk training is probably the easiest one to lower without having a huge ramification. I'm just worried that, like, it does reduce the ability for them to expense line things and move things around without it having to come out of a contingency fund and having to get council approval. It does kind of limit the departments more than just from training, because those funds, if they're not used for training, can potentially be used for other things in the department with, like, the administrator's approval without it having to come to council all the way. If we use contingency funds, then we're going to have to get more approval for contingency funds. So that's my biggest concern with taking the funds away. But it's really hard to argue against taking them away if we've never really used them there. So, I don't know. That's a hard choice. It's a hard budget year, and that's a hard choice. So, is there any more discussion on it? Or do we just want to kind of see the way the council, the way everyone's feeling? Do you want to go item by item? Does someone want to propose what they would like? Or do you want to just do them all at once? How would you guys like to kind of resolve this on what we want, how we would like to move forward with the budget?
I would just like to point out that if we go line item by line item, that's fine. But if people are against, for, like I'm hearing, the fire, and you want that $4,100 taken out, in order to keep the budget balanced, then we have to go back and adjust that contingency expense or find another $4,100 somewhere else. You see what I'm saying?
Yep, for sure. I understand completely. Like the 4,100 would have to come out of the 5875 would be the simplest thing, and then it would go down to 5165.
Yeah.
If that's what the council wanted. So how would you guys like to? Well, let's just start it out real basic and just do a yes for everything she proposed, or a no, keep it the same. Where are we on that? Like, who supports changing it the way Sarah proposed entirely? By a show of hands, who wants to change the budget the way Sarah proposed? All right. Then is there an alternate plan to change the budget? Does anyone want to change the budget with the exception of the fire department and reduce the contingency fund to the 51,650 instead? By a show of hands, anyone want to do that? So did Shelley, Mayor Arnold, would you be in favor of that, Sarah?
Sure.
Okay, so that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, and Amy. So, okay, so we do have support for that then, for altering the budget with the exception of the fire department, if that makes sense. Is everyone tracking what I'm trying to get us to? I think in this scenario, and Kyle, do we need to bring this to the regular meeting for official approval, or do we just want to vote on this now?
No, I think if I know what you'd like to see in the amended budget, I would be bringing that to the meeting on the 16th. The budget that we published is already kind of set in stone. So that is the budget that is out there for evaluation. So any changes we make just needs to be, prior to adoption, made as part of the budget to change it from what was published. But if that's what the consensus is, I will be bringing the document with all those changes already incorporated so that it's there in its full form to be adopted.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. So it sounds like that's what the majority consensus is to make most of the alterations and reductions and additions that Alder Motive put forward, with the exception of the fire department. So that would reduce the proposed contingency account to $51,650. Is that correct, Sarah? Is my math? Okay, good. Thank goodness that the fire department was an easy number to do it by head, otherwise I could have went through that. Hey, awesome, and thank you so much for working so hard on that for us, Sarah. It's not I mean, Kyle's worked tirelessly on this budget, and it's not an easy budget year, we all know, so finding a little bit of money to use the contingency fund is appreciated. Any other discussion? All right, then with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Shelley and Sarah, for the additional work, and everyone else that's awesome. If you guys need anything, and when it comes time, I'm all in for helping with signage.